Hi, my name is Yamini, and I was wondering how, as leaders, you get cut through with your key messages. Recently, I bought a packet of nuts, and I flipped it over, and on the back it said, "Warning may contain nuts." How much of our business communication is like that, where we're telling people stuff that they probably already know, and yet you're not able to get cut through? There's so little recall, and then there's so little action. One of the things that can help you is storytelling. But not any old made-up stories, but sharp, short, compelling business stories. That whole field is known as organizational storytelling. Storytelling with a business purpose. Now that I've defined it, I'm going to actually give you an example of what an organizational story might look like. If you had the challenge of explaining the concept of competitive advantage, you could do it through several ways. You could show people lots of data, you could refer them to websites, you could do a 20 PowerPoint slide presentation, and in addition you could tell them this little parable. Two CEOs set out into the woods for a weekend away, and in the distance they spotted an attacking grizzly bear. One of the CEOs very calmly took a pair of sneakers out of his backpack and started to put them on. And the other CEO said, "You nuts, we can't outrun a grizzly bear." To which the first CEO very calmly replied, "I don't have to, but I sure as hell can outrun you." That's competitive advantage in a nutshell. Does that for you do three things? Does it firstly help you understand what competitive advantage is? Would you remember that in a week's time, in a month's time, in a year's time? And can you retell it without losing its original meaning? This test of three, can you understand, can you remember, can you retell, is the Dan and Chip Heath test from their book Made to Stick. And we think story helps you with all those three challenges. I've defined what business storytelling is. We're now going to next look at what is the difference between business storytelling and traditional storytelling. There are three key things that separate organizational storytelling and traditional storytelling. Firstly, in business, your stories have to be always driven by purpose. So in entertainment or traditional storytelling, you can tell a story just as a joke, to pass time, as a bit of a filler. But in business, your stories have to be driven by purpose. They make your stories effective and compelling. To give you an example, one of our clients was struggling with getting his sales team to achieve their weekly sales targets. He talked to his team many times, and his team said two things. They said, "We absolutely know what our targets are. We have all the data we need, but it's the one thing we hate doing week after week after week." So he came to our workshops and he constructed this story, and I'm going to just tell it to you, narrate it in the first person. He said, "When I was a young child, my mother used to serve Brussels sprouts at dinner, and I hated Brussels sprouts. Every time Brussels sprouts were served, I would push the Brussels sprouts to one side of the plate, and I would eat my dinner, knowing very well that at the end, I would have to eat these cold Brussels sprouts because my mother would never let me leave unless I'd eaten my vegetables. One day when I sat down to dinner, and Brussels sprouts was yet again on the menu, I decided to eat the Brussels sprouts first. I then relaxed and enjoyed the rest of my meal." He connected this to his sales team by saying, "Do you think we could do this with our sales leads? Could we treat them like Brussels sprouts? We can't leave the table unless we've eaten them. Could we eat them early and fast in the week and then just relax and enjoy the rest of our week?" He saw us 2 weeks after, so he traveled to 11 of his branches, and he saw us 2 weeks later. And he said, "I don't know whether it was the story, but I've had the best increase in quality sales leads in those 11 branches." And we assured him that it was the story. The second thing that separates business storytelling from traditional storytelling is in business, your stories support your hard data. I run a business on organizational storytelling, and I would never go to pitch for work on just a story. I would absolutely use hard data. Whatever it is your clients, your customers, your stakeholder needs, absolutely use hard data. But if in addition you can tell a compelling story, that's really powerful. I was listening to an economist being interviewed on radio, and he was talking about the impact the subprime market crisis in America was having globally. And he spun out all this data. And then he said, it is as if when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. That little metaphor helps people connect with the data. The third thing that separates business storytelling from traditional storytelling is that in business, unless it's a parable, your stories must be authentically true. There's no point, it's not worth the backlash in narrating stories that are made up or fictitious. So a good business story is purposeful, supports your hard data, and must be authentically true. The good news with storytelling is we all already do it naturally, organically, intuitively. The bad news is, just because we do it in our social, day-to-day lives, that doesn't mean that entire skill set is transportable as is into business. But storytelling, like any skill, can be taught and learned, and with coaching and practice, we can all get better at it. To quote Stephen Denning, your choice as a leader is not whether to use storytelling. We already use it. Our choice is whether we choose to use it intelligently and skillfully.